Chapter 2 Humble Bragging First World Problems. Going to high school is a huge transition for anyone, and I was no different. In my district, elementary school was grade 1 to 6, middle school was from 7 to 9, and high school was 10 to 12. After that, it was straight to university or college. I went to high school with over 2,100 students, and my graduating class was over 700 students. When I was registering for my course, I decided to take Chinese because I thought it would be an easy grade booster and a free class to dick around in. We also had the coolest teacher, shout out to Mr. Xiao. He was a Chinese immigrant to Canada himself and understood how hard it was to learn a language. My brother and I had Chinese classes on Saturdays between 8 a.m. and noon. My mom would force us to go no matter how much we cried or whined. No, seriously, if you ask a kid to wake up at 7 in the morning on a Saturday to go to school, you're going to get some pushback, right? Once I was at Chinese school and surrounded by other students, I was okay. However, play was always on my mind, so I barely did any work. There was this one time where I started drawing on my desk with ink pen, and everything I touched after that was blue. Another time, I started poking holes in my desk. Literally, I would just use anything sharp and just start digging into it. My teacher had to sit my mom down and tell her what I did. You might think she said I was making a mess of things. Nope. My teacher did the complete opposite. She murdered my mom with kindness. She said that I was so intelligent that I did not need to come to Chinese school anymore. She kicked me out because I was too smart and the classes were too easy for me. Because the class was not challenging enough. I would just fuck around at my desk, and that's why I got kicked out of one Chinese school. I got kicked out of another Chinese school because I was caught cheating. I would come to class and the teacher would tell us to put everything away for a test. I had no idea we had a test, so I just turned around and copied some other kid's work. I didn't get away with it, but so what? It meant I didn't have to go to school the next weekend. Score. When I look back, I wish I hadn't been such a shitty student because I wouldn't have gotten kicked out of Chinese school. Now I can only speak elementary grade Chinese, which is pretty harsh and redneck sounding. As a Chinese kid born in Canada, I kind of knew my native language, but if you actually try to talk to me in Mandarin, I would have just given you a blank stare. Back then, my peers were way better than me, so I made up for it the way I knew best, by cheating. When you're a kid, you just want to have fun and you don't know shit about responsibility. You just want to move on to the next adventure. I totally see how much of a brat I was for my mom because those classes cost her time and money. During those years, I saw both my parents' companies grow. After my mom worked her way up the corporate ladder in the travel agency world, she started her own travel company specializing in Southeast Asian tours, mostly to China, Hong Kong, and Vietnam. Since our high school was one of the biggest in the district, they would get a lot of funding for trips. When I was in grade 11, there were 2 trips for students to go on, one to Europe and the other one to China. When my Chinese teacher was organizing the trip to China, he asked the students if we knew a travel agent. Of course, I put up my hand. My mom's a travel agent. That was the first time I gave my mom a referral for her business, and that school trip ended up getting my mom many years of high school and middle school business because other Chinese teachers and schools started to use her service. When it was announced that the trip to China was a go and students were allowed to sign up, a lot of my classmates started to ask if I was going to go. I said, sure, if you go, I'll go. That trip was a blast. For 2 weeks, I got to hang out with my friends in a different country, stay in hotels with the cute girls in class, sit beside them on the bus, and sneak out of my hotel room at night just to hang out with them until late in the morning. That's what a high school trip is all about, getting crazy with your homies and making memories. Hey, I even got a chance to make out in bed with one of the girls. Nothing happened though, since I was young and too dumb to know how to use my boner. So I just tucked it away when we were kissing. Good old frigid days. As my mom was finding success with her travel business, she started asking my dad to go to China to do groundwork there for her while his business partner watched their restaurant. Since my mom got involved in the school trip to China because of me, it just made sense that my dad should come along. It was awesome because I got a chance to share a room with my dad, and he didn't care when I came back because he knew I was with my school friends. I was spoiled. I didn't have to do anything to get on that trip. Mom, I want to go to China. That's all I said. Okay. She replied without another word. My parents did everything, applied for the visa, made the booking, and even paid for it. I had the kind of parents that valued traveling. Anywhere in the world I wanted to go, they would pay for. And by the time I graduated high school, I've been back and forth to Asia half a dozen times. I just thought it was normal. I thought everyone had the ability to just hop on a plane and fuck off to another country. Boy, was I wrong about that. My reality check came after high school. I was extremely spoiled and I didn't even know it. My mom did though. She knew I needed to come down to earth, so she decided to kick me out of the house and send me to Vietnam. I don't want to go to Vietnam again. It was the word again that triggered my mom. You, like her, might be thinking, wow, Wilson, you got a chance to go to Asia for another free holiday? Yes. But this time, my mom decided it was going to be different. A few months later, I was on a flight to Vietnam. No Canadian summer for me. No hanging out with my friends. I was going to live in Viet fucking Nam for the next 4 months. Not only that, but there would be no fancy hotel with air conditioning and a breakfast buffet. I was going by myself to live with my mom's side of the family, and they were poor. Like, extreme poverty poor. Their home had no sealed doors, windows, or rooms. It was open concept living for people, bugs, wind, dirt, and smells. This was my first taste of independence. I was experiencing the world for the first time by myself. It was uncomfortable and challenging. Yet going on tours with my dad and watching him work had rubbed off on me. So I wasn't a complete idiot when it came to traveling. I made it to the right gate, boarded my flight. The 14 hours later, boom, I was in Vietnam. I don't remember much about that flight except there were in-flight movies and unlimited ice cream. I do remember what it was like in Vietnam when I arrived though. Pouring. Despite the rain, most of my aunts, uncles, and cousins came to pick me up from the airport. With them came the predictable comments. Oh, you're so handsome. You've grown so tall and big. Do you have a girlfriend yet? If you replied, no, I don't have a girlfriend, you're bound to get, why not? On the other hand, if you answered yes, the next question is, so when are you going to get married? Skipping ahead, once you get married is, when are you going to have kids? Being a high school kid in Canada without a girlfriend is pretty standard, but when you live in poverty, you should be married and the family breadwinner at 17. If you're lucky, like my parents, you'll live long enough to see your kids grow up. My dad was one of 8 children, and I reckon my grandparents just popped him out, crossed their fingers, and relied on survival of the fittest. Adjusting to Vietnam's climate was challenging. Canada was cool and dry. Vietnam was hot and humid. I hated the fact that I would sweat all the time. No matter how many times I showered, my body just felt sticky. Still, it wasn't really showering. It was just pouring a bucket of rainwater collected the day before over your head. There's no such thing as hot water or warm water for that matter. To have a hot shower, we had to boil water on the stove and then bring it into the showering room. The shower stall was just a tiny aged cement room with large cracks in the wall that gave you a great view of the living room and presumably gave anyone in the living room a great view of you. The shower water exited through the house drainage system. There was no fancy pipes, just a trough that guided the dirty water out into the street. This was Vietnamese hygiene at its most basic. Another way to shower was outside during a tropical storm. I remember the kids around the neighborhood taking off their clothes in the street and showering under a runoff from the roof of a shack. Taking a shower outside was one way those kids found fun in the face of poverty. Rainstorms were also when street cleaning happened. Since garbage disposal in Vietnam is something that, like Christmas, happens once a year, there is always leftover food and trash on the sidewalks and street. Getting rid of your garbage in Vietnam is easy. Drop it behind you and walk away. This was great for the street rats. Buffet meals daily. Rats and rains are the 2 main ways that people dispose of their garbage in Vietnam. A rainstorm washes away the dirt, grime, and animal poop, of which there's plenty of. In Canada, it's just common courtesy to pick up your dog's shit. In Vietnam, the rain does it for you. During a downpour is also when critters come indoors to find shelter. At night, that really sucks. I try to take a piss, and I see these beady rat eyes glowing back at me in the dark. Since rats literally eat everything, they grow into unfathomable sizes. I kid you not, the rats I saw were the size of a small kitten or a chihuahua dog. It was fucking disgusting. This is the stuff my extended family had to deal with on a day-to-day basis. I eventually got over it, but only because I would talk to myself while walking downstairs, asking the rats and the roaches to leave me alone during my time of vulnerability. But rats and roaches weren't the only things I had to worry about. Now, let me say this. I'm not really scared of spiders because the ones in Canada we have are like the size of a coin and eat annoying flies and mosquitoes, but in Vietnam, they're massive. On one particular warm and humid afternoon, I needed to poop real bad. Should be no biggie, so I go to the back of the house and head over to the washer, drop my pants down, and proceed to drop the kids off at the pool. Then it was time to wipe, but I couldn't. The loaf of toilet paper was on my right hand side, but I couldn't get to it because there was a massive fucking spider the size of a dinner plate inside the toilet paper dispenser. Trust me, when you're faced with a creature bigger than your hand while you're taking a shit, something funny happens to you. You start negotiating. Our negotiations went something like this. I said, excuse me, I'm trying to wipe my ass. Could you just move, like, to the right a little bit so I can grab some toilet paper? But the spider didn't respond and didn't move. Come on, man, don't make me walk out with crumbs on my butt. That's not cool. You're not being nice at all. Still nothing. I beg, please, dude, don't make me yell for my aunt. Come on, please. Come on. No response. There was nothing for it. Auntie, I need toilet paper! Hearing that, my aunt rushed over to the door and started talking me through it. Hey, why do you need toilet paper? There should be some in there already. There's a spider on the toilet paper. Oh, that's all? Just kill it, she responded. Don't worry, Wilson, I thought. Sure, go ahead. Kill the spider that's big enough to eat you and your cat. No biggie. But I couldn't. Instead, I shamelessly flushed and walked right out of there. The spider won, and I had to go rinse my ass off in the shower room. And fun fact, I'm a little crazy now because anytime I encounter a spider, I won't try to harm it. I just ask it politely to leave. So, I talked about two aspects of Vietnamese life that begins with the S. Showering, shitting, and here's the third one. Sleep. If you're thinking mattress on a bare wooden floor, bingo, you got it. And not only was it a mattress on a floor, it was a communal sleeping room, meaning 4 or 5 people sleeping on the floor around each other. Since I was the guest, I at least got the good mattress. My aunt and my cousins would rotate where they sleep each night, so everyone got equal use of the only mosquito net in the house. Sleeping on the floor on top of a mattress isn't too bad. After a few weeks, you get used to the back pain. Even though Vietnam had tropical temperatures, nighttime can be cold. Like not Canada cold where it's dry and you can just layer up. Vietnam cold is wet and it chills you to the bone. After a rainstorm, that wet, cold feeling comes around you and you need to sleep with a blanket. Thankfully, I had the necessity, a pillow, a blanket, and a mattress. And the other thing that made me feel at ease was the music from my MP3 player. Now, this is way before streaming or phones that could hold an entire library. This was a 256 megabyte MP3 player. Yes, that's megabytes, not gigabytes. I couldn't even charge it with a USB cord because I had to use AAA batteries to keep it running. What was great about the limited space was that I had to choose my 40 favorite songs. There was no room for error. Those would be the only 40 songs I could play, so I had to choose the perfect mix. Trust me, being in a foreign country with no friends, speaking a language your relatives can barely understand, and playing with the younger kids around the neighborhoods because there's nothing better to do gets pretty old pretty quick. So my music was my home away from home. It saved me from extreme boredom. I bought my MP3 player everywhere just in case I need a pick-me-up from whatever I was experiencing. Most of those wet, cold nights, I would have my earphones in and listen to whatever until I fell asleep. One particular night, when it was pouring so hard that the rain splashing off the tin roof echoed throughout the house, I put in my headphones and tried to drift off. As the rain banged on the roof, I would occasionally hear the sky rumble with thunder, or someone in the room snoring. I was a light sleeper, so as I tossed and turned trying to find the good position, one earphone would pop out. Half asleep, I'd lazily find it with my eyes closed, fumble it back into my ear. Then I would just toss and turn and it would just fall out again. Eventually, tired of this, I decided to sleep on my back. I shifted and moved and finally found a comfy spot on my back. Earphones in, I felt locked and loaded for a good night's sleep. Then, as I was finally on the verge of falling asleep, my earphones fell out again on my cheek. Wait a minute, I couldn't have. I was sleeping on my back and still heard music playing in both my ears. At this point, I went fast asleep to fear. What the fuck was on my face? I was petrified. I started to panic. I didn't dare move. All I could think of was, holy shit, what was on my face? Get the fuck off my face. I felt another tickle and I smacked whatever it was into oblivion. I ripped my blanket off my body, got up quickly, and looked down to inspect whatever it was. Cockroaches. Not just one tiny roach. There were dozens of them. Godzilla-sized roaches were sleeping with me. They were hugging my body, stealing my heat, using me to keep warm. I screamed and I shook them all off my mattress and they scattered into the dark in all directions. I just remember being mad, like disgusted, upset, and fuming that I was sleeping with roaches. My aunt woke up beside me and asked, what happened? I was sleeping with roaches, I said. I shit you not. My aunt just started laughing and asked me, what do you want me to do about it? Welcome to Vietnam. It was at that moment that I knew there was nothing I could do about my circumstances. I learned how to accept poverty, and I understood that this is how my aunts and uncles lived every day, and that my mom and my dad used to live like this too. That was the moment at which this trip became very and truly humbling. After a few more months in Vietnam, I finally got a chance to have a real vacation before I went back home to Canada. I was going to fly to Hong Kong to meet my dad, who was going to take me around Hong Kong and China. I was just excited because I love tennis and I wanted to buy a ton of cheap tennis clothes in China. But as I said goodbye to my aunts and my uncles at the airport in Vietnam, I sensed they knew I had changed. I was no longer fussy about what I ate. I could sleep almost anywhere. And the biggest change of all was that I had stopped complaining. I enjoyed the trip to Hong Kong with my dad. I got a bunch of tennis gear. I have photos of me wearing this green and white polo shirt and shorts, and others of me in all white outfit with navy and blue accent. That was my favorite late teen fashion, tennis wear. But after I came back home, my mom never asked me about that trip. I thought it was weird since she was the one who set me on it, but let's be honest, she knew what I needed to go through. I went to Vietnam from a privileged country just for one summer, and it made me realize that my life in Canada wasn't so bad. The living conditions in Vietnam were awful, and my relatives had to live in them every day. Living it made me realize why my parents sent money back to my relatives. It was to increase the quality of life for my parents' brothers, their sisters, and I realized that my mom sent me on the trip not to punish me, but to humble me. Sure, living in poverty for a few weeks wouldn't do the trick on its own, but now, when I look back at my experience in Vietnam, that whole summer makes a lot of sense. After living this experience at 17 years old, I knew that if there were any challenges ahead in my future, I'd be okay. I didn't have to live in poverty anymore. I didn't have to sleep with the roaches or negotiate with spiders. I didn't have to shower with a bucket or collect rainwater. This is how I got a chance to humble brag my first world problems. Chapter 2 summaries. If you suck at a second language, you can cheat your way into getting high marks. And remember that rules at home do not apply for international school trips. Seek fun, always. Never talk back to your mom or else she will send you to Vietnam or beat you, whichever is cheaper. Remember that taking your clothes off in public to shower in the rain may be prohibited in your areas, but I think you should try it and just let me know how it goes. By sleeping with roaches, you automatically become the bug whisperer. You might even make a new friend while taking a shit.